Good morning, everybody. You ready to call this meeting to order? Get rolling and rocking, or whatever the term. I'd like to start out to call this meeting to order. Good morning again. Thank you all for coming. Members of the MAG 911 Oversight Team, this meeting is now called to order.
Good morning, members of the MAG PSAP Managers Group. This meeting is now called to order.
And we'd like to start off with maybe some housekeeping items from Nathan Pryor.
Great. Thank you to our chairs. Thank you everyone for being here today. Obviously, it's a little bit different. It's a joint meeting of the PSAP Managers Group as well as the 911 Oversight Team. Just in terms of meeting logistics and housekeeping, we do run this meeting as two bodies. So we're going to go through roll call for each body. We don't have any action items today, so I think that's going to make it a little bit neater. So we'll probably just have to go through this roll call once, so bear with us. We will be keeping minutes as a group, if you will, but as subsequent meetings, probably plan on having each body review and approve minutes independently. So just a little bit different meeting setup. I think once we get rolling, though, into our presentations, the flow will be just fine, and we'll get through it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you're welcome. This is so exciting. All right. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located at a table near you on the information table in the hallway. If you parked in the garage, parking validation are available on the information table. Just stamp that dog. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to this meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from the MAG staff. We are now begin the joint meeting with a roll call of all members of the MAG 911 Oversight Team.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the 911 Oversight Team, when I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Jonathan with Avondale PD.
Present.
Robert with Buckeye PD. Michelle with Chandler PD.
Present.
Brent with Glendale PD.
Present.
Santiago with Goodyear PD.
Present.
Patrick with MCSO.
This is Jim Prindeville. I am present on Patrick's behalf. He is no longer with the agency.
Thank you, Jim. Forrest with Mesa Fire.
Present. Thank you.
Douglas with Peoria. Scott with Phoenix Fire.
Present.
Jesse with Phoenix PD.
Present.
Bo with Scottsdale PD.
Karen Sutherland for Bo.
Cody for Surprise Fire.
Present.
And then Tempe PD. It says Catherine Masters. Is there anyone that I've missed?
Jessica Kelly, AJPD.
David.
Oh, this is for 911 Oversight, Jessica. We haven't done PSAP yet. Okay. So, Chair, we do have a quorum for 911 oversight.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we will now begin the joint meeting with a roll call of all members of the MAG PSAP Managers Group.
Thank you. Apache Junction, Jessica.
Present.
Arizona TPS, Kiera. Or Jill. ASU, Trish.
Present.
Avondale, Angela.
Present.
Buckeye, Jim.
Present.
Chandler, Stephanie.
Present.
Fort Dalles, Stephanie. Gilbert PD, Kim.
Present.
Glendale, Loretta.
Present.
GMR, Kristen. Goodyear, Shauna.
Present.
Luke, Air Force Base, David.
Present.
MCSO, Jim.
Present. Good morning.
Mesa Fire, Nicole. Mesa PD, Lindy. Present. Paradise Valley, Heather.
Present.
Prairie PD, Brittany.
Present.
Phoenix Fire, Jim.
Present. Good morning.
Salt River, I'm sorry, Phoenix PD, Alley.
Present.
Salt River PD, Kathy.
Present.
Scottsdale PD, Karen.
Casey Crockett for Karen.
Surprise, Damala. Tempe PD, Tanya. Tolleson PD, Amanda. And then Wickenburg PD, Aaron. Are there any PSAP manager members that I did not call? Chairman Stephanie, we have a full core.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Liz. That was quite the roll call. That's all I got to say about that. Okay, our next item is a call to the audience. MAG provides the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments via the MAG's website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with the committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration, will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Mr. Chairman, we've received no comments and for this item or any other item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now we get to move to number 3. We'll now have an update on the work of the MAG 911 Study Committee. Audrey Skidmore, MAG Information Technology Director, and Nathan Pryor, Special Projects Administrator, will give us this outstanding update.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the chairman of the oversight team and chair of the PSAP Managers Group. Thanks everyone for joining us today for this update on the activities of the 911 Study Committee. You'll see from what we present, Audrey Skidmore and I present today, naturally flows into the next agenda item from Arizona Department of Administration staff regarding transition considerations to state contract service. So let me back up a little bit. Over the past 14 or so months, the MAG 911 Study Committee has been meeting. Next slide, please. You'll see the composition there. Much of last year was spent working with federal engineering consulting firm that was doing a look at our Maricopa Region 911 as well as a comparative study for other major metros around the United States in terms of their 911 services. Also developed a list of 7 options that were included in that report that was accepted by the study committee. And that work wrapped up in about the summertime. Since then, the study committee has continued to meet and really considering a number of issue areas. In addition to the study committee meeting, the co-chairs, Chris Brady for city manager of Mesa, Kevin Phelps, the city manager of Glendale, with participation by Jeff Barton, city manager of Phoenix, I've had a number of conversations with ADOA staff, trying to better understand some of the aspects of state contract services and what we would like to see as a region in terms of the contract. Audrey Skidmore is going to walk through some of those items here in a minute. Just like to thank everyone for their patience in getting to this point. The study committee did recommend an approval at their January 4th meeting, and that was to transition to state contract services. We'll show you that action here in a little bit. That recommended approval was forwarded to the MAG Management Committee. MAG Management Committee met on January 10th and unanimously recommended approval. So that item is now headed to our January Regional Council meeting. I believe that's January 31st. MAG Regional Council will be hearing this item, and it's anticipated that they're going to approve the recommended approval, which really demarcates a transition period. So it's triggers a lot more work ahead of us, if you will. Again, Audrey Skidmore is going to walk through some of those details as well as the presentation from ADOA staff. So a lot of work is just beginning. I think there's a lot of questions that still need to be addressed. Top of mind for myself is governance in terms of these two bodies continuing to meet. What will be your all's charge as committee members in terms of the purview of these committees. Personally, I think there's an opportunity to continue conversations around regional 911, even when we do move to state contract service in terms of monitoring that service, sharing kind of those experiences. Eventually, state contract will be up for renegotiation at some point. So it's good, I think, as a region that we can collect our shared experiences with those services so that we're able to have that dialogue with ADOA and their vendor going forward. So I think that's one opportunity there in terms of continuing these conversations at MAG. There's a number of other points that we need to walk through, but I think today we'll kind of stay on the more technical points. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Audrey Skidmore. She's going to focus in on 6 areas that the study committee and the co-chairs had conversations with ADOA, a lot of productive conversations. Want to thank ADOA staff for their ongoing involvement with us. It was a lot of meetings, a lot of back and forth over the late calendar months of 2023 to get to this point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Audrey Skidmore.
Okay, so the primary areas of discussion are listed here, and I'll walk through them individually. Next slide, Tyler. So first, with the policy routing functions, we asked ADOA to come and present on this today, particularly because it doesn't work exactly the same way, and there are opportunities for calls to be transferred more often than perhaps you're used to your partners. And so we wanted to have a discussion so we were all on the same page about how that works, make sure everybody's thinking about the same issues so that they can be good neighbors to each other, and see if there are any agreements they need to put in place to cover that, or maybe adjustments to the default. So the other piece of this is the hosting. We know there have been some issues. If you and your backup partner are on the same host and the host goes down, then your calls don't have anywhere to go. So kind of talking about those issues. So ADOA will be addressing those to this group today as a joint committee. Next slide, please. The issue of geographic stability and weather issues around where the data centers are, we want to look at that in the next RFP cycle. It's not really practical to do it now, but we have raised that issue as something that we want to have considered in the locations going forward. Next slide. We talked about the opportunity to create those contracts either individually or as partners. The vendors are open to both. So whatever makes sense moving forward to make those contracts with the state contract vendors. There's also the issue, and Nathan touched on this, of when the RFP comes up for renewal, having the opportunity to have a regional voice to carry a little more weight in those negotiations so that the issues we want to see addressed get addressed in that renewal. Next slide, please. So we've had extensive discussions around service level agreements. We want to make sure that those are consistent with what we believe are necessary for a major metro. ADOA has already spoken to their vendors and had a few adjustments made. They are actively looking to have some additional adjustments made. We had federal engineering go out and look at kind of what was in use at 8 other major metros and other big areas. The state also did some analysis. So I think we have general agreement that we want to see those service level agreements improved. And we're making progress in that direction, but this is some of that ongoing work that we've been talking about doing. Next slide. And then we've just been trying to get additional clarity around the funding process. It looks like there'll be opportunities to streamline that going forward, but then there's still the question of how do decisions get made about the extras? How does that money get allocated? And so that's still a point of ongoing discussion. Next slide. And then one of the most critical pieces we wanted addressed was a commitment to fund the existing system through the complete transition at the levels that are required to maintain that service. When federal engineering did their analysis, they were impressed with MR911 and the level of redundancy and resiliency that's provided. And we wanted to make sure that we maintain that completely through the transition period and then a little bit beyond, so that if there's any issues, we have the ability to roll back. And they have committed to fund that through the transition plus 30 days. And so that's where we've gone on that. The other important piece that we wanted to address was the paused Next Gen 911 rollout. We did get agreement to start that process again, and it is on schedule to be finished at the end of February. Next slide. So ADOA did provide us with a draft transition schedule. And you can see it here. I will say this is draft. So we're not holding them exactly to this. Please don't hold us to it. I mean, it is subject to the availability of the lines and the equipment and making sure that things happen on schedule. You'll notice that Mesa and Phoenix aren't necessarily at the end. They are holding up the core services, and they'll have to go at the end of that transition period. Next slide. So Nathan, do you want to cover this one?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. You know, the region has been at this since the mid 1980s in terms of Maricopa Region 911, City of Phoenix with their responsibilities and servicing 911. So I'd like to acknowledge all their work and effort over the years. So thank you to MR 911 staff and City of Phoenix, as well as over the years, these two bodies, PSAP managers and Oversight team, for all their work. So it's been a journey to get to this point. And again, this really demarcates a transition with more work to come. So I look forward to providing additional updates to you. On the screen there, you can see the action that I mentioned taken by the study committee and management committee to date, really recommending that approval to transition to state contract services, and you can read the rest. So that will be in the agenda for the MAG Regional Council on January 31st for their consideration. Mr. Chairman, we'll pause there for any questions. Of course, noting again, ADOA staff is going to be on right after this agenda item and can help address some of these technical issues as well. Their focus today is on policy routing functions, but I think there's probably quite a number of questions, and I think ADOA can probably assist in answering some of those when we get to the next agenda item.
Thank you for that update, Audrey and Nathan. Are there any questions from any of the members or anybody on the call? Yeah, go ahead.
So after we do this migration, what role is MAG going to play?
Yeah, thank you to the chairs and Ms. Potts. As again, that's one of those things that are kind of outstanding on our list. And we'll have to review that. We know that the study committee co-chairs also noted this as something that we need to continue to work on, consider, and think about. I think we're just really going to focus on this technical piece right now regarding the migration and transition as outlined in the timeline, meaning that the two committees, the PSAPs and the oversight team, will continue your all's work. We're going to continue meeting and really use these two bodies as an opportunity for ADOA to also provide updates and then an opportunity to provide feedback as well during the transition and any elements that our PSAPs are seeing that need to be addressed. That doesn't forego any opportunity in the meantime when issues need to be addressed right away. Of course, you should be reaching out to ADOA, MR 911 vendors as appropriate. But we're going to continue meeting with these two bodies for the foreseeable future. Beyond then, I think, again, we'll have to kind of consider the governance role here in the region. Is this of value to member agencies? So more considerations to be had on that front.
Any other comments or questions from anybody before we move on to the next item? Hearing none, we will now hear and get an update from Travis Jensen from the Arizona Department of Administration 911 Administrator regarding considerations for transition to the state contract service for regional 911. Travis?
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, we've also invited ADOA staff to join Travis. And if there are a lot of questions and ADOA is more comfortable sitting at the table so we can have that exchange, we can certainly do that as well. So trying to be flexible and provide an opportunity for some dialogue here.
Perfect. Thank you.
So hi, can you hear me? Good. Okay. I find these interesting. Members of both committees, I want to just say hi, introduce myself. I am Lisa Meyerson Marshall. I'm work for the Department of Administration. I've actually been with the department for over 25 years. Used to be the statewide interoperability coordinator and during the time after 9/11. So I have some very acute awareness of what you do and the challenges that you face. And some of you I know from those years, but some of you I've never met. I am responsible to the director of the Department of Administration, to the governor, and to the state CIO for the 911 program, which reports to me. So if you want to know, Scott asks me from time to time, who do I call? You can always call me. And Nathan has my contact information. You got a problem? I want to hear about it. I want to fix it. I'm known for doing that. So I will turn you over to Travis, who will answer all of your technical questions, etc. I work very closely with this team. We meet multiple times weekly. It's a high priority for us, obviously. And in particular, the last year, we're very proud of the transition of the state to the next generation system. Successfully done, thank God, throughout the state. And now we have this big challenge of our concentrated population area in this big region with the challenges that come along with. I am from New York, so I'm used to big cities. I've only lived in big cities throughout my life. This is considered small for me because I lived in New York and Los Angeles before I moved here, but I've been here since 97, so I'm almost a native. Anyway, just wanted to say hi to all of you and feel free to grab me after the meeting and introduce yourself one-on-one or call me up just to say hi so we can get to know each other. We're here to serve you. We're here to serve the citizens of the state as you are in this very important initiative and this very important region. So any questions from me, I can take them now. Otherwise, I'm going to go sit and let Travis nerd out on policy routing. Alrighty, thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I think most of you know me, but for those of you that don't, Travis Jensen, I'm the now administrator for the state of Arizona's Department of Administration. Just to reiterate some of the points Mr. Pryor and Ms. Skidmore had stated, we've been meeting with the study committee quite frequently over the course of the last several years over a multitude of topics, including those 6 that they prioritized. The data centers, SLAs, how procurement wants to be done, whether as a region or individually. And then one of the most important topics that came up that they wanted us to present on was the policy routing function. This has potential to have significant implications to your operations. So that was a big reason why they wanted to make sure that everybody understood this as much as you can. We understand that technologists are not always on the same page with the operations, and that the operations experts, all of you, are not always in the know with the technologists. So we want to try to bridge the gaps that we have to make sure that everybody understands the role that you play, how important this is, and how this could affect your day-to-day operations once you get the chance to migrate over to the state solution. Next slide, please. So what we want to talk about today, here's a small agenda. So just kind of talking about what is the policy routing function, PRF, some key considerations we want you to think about, a little bit of education, process, workflow, hosts, some examples of some additional considerations, an updated draft timeline based on conversations we've had with all of you in the region, and then kind of what the next steps are going to look like in 2024 and beyond. So I pulled this straight from the NENA standards. NENA is the National Emergency Number Association. This group is responsible for writing the vast majority of 911 standards in the nation. I'm not gonna read this for you, other than that last sentence that kind of talks about the point of the PRF. If you, for any reason, are unable to take and process your own calls, where do you want us to send those calls to? So that is kind of the crux of the situation where we're at. There's going to be a multitude of reasons why you wouldn't be able to take a phone call. We're going to break those down for you guys. But one of the, I think, nice things and massive benefits of moving to a next generation 911 system is we're going to force your hand on interoperability, right? We're going to give you a lot of opportunities to engage with each other, and however you want that to look from an operations perspective. We're not here to tell you how you run your operations. We're here to educate you on the tools that are now available to you that haven't been available to you for the past 20 or 30 years, and then work with you and partner with you to put these tools in place to help you guys have more effective operations going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so currently, if you're not on a next generation 911 system, you use something called default routing or alternative routing. There's some limitations to this, primarily on the vendor side. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on technology, but if you've heard things like selective routers or camera trunks, those are some antiquated pieces of technology and more legacy networks, and they don't really allow us the full capabilities and functionality of the next generation 911 policy routing function, which I'm going to get more into here shortly. The state has a lot of vendors, specifically in the 911 realm. You've probably met with the majority of them. Some of the bigger ones, AT&T, Motorola, Comtech, Solacom, companies like Rave. So when we're talking about the PRF, the sole entity that's responsible to help you implement this is Comtech. So this has nothing to do with AT&T. This has nothing to do with Motorola and the Vesta solution. This is on the network side, and Comtech is the state's network and next generation core service provider. And they're responsible for all of the routing of your 911 calls. So every single 911 call in the state of Arizona goes to Comtech, or will, once this migration is completed. And then they will send the calls based on functional elements of the next generation core services that tell them where the call is supposed to go. So once again, for the point of today, Comtech is the vendor that we're going to be discussing. The information that we're going to provide is to help you guys configure your PRFs. I want to reiterate this point. Once again, we are just here to educate you. I'm not making any decisions on how you guys policy route. I do have opinions. If you would like another set of eyes to take a look at what you would like to implement, Comtech has subject matter experts. We have consultants that we work with. So if you would like to kind of get confirmation that the way you're thinking about this is correct and appropriate, we can all put our heads together to make sure that the solution is in the best interest of you, your citizens, and the other members of your agency. And then the last bullet here, highly encouraged to work together. In the other counties that we've implemented this on, a lot of engagement. There's going to need to be a lot of engagement from all of you. As I said, that there is a considerable amount of impact that this can have. And we just want to make sure that we're setting up the best solution. So hopefully prepare to be engaged and collaborative with one another. Okay, some things we want you to just think about when you're talking about who you want to back you up and how that's going to happen. So first and foremost, thinking about maybe what your call volumes look like. So can your alternative PSAP or PSAPs handle the amount of calls that you take? I'm going to use the most aggressive example possible. We probably don't want to send Phoenix PD calls to Paradise Valley, which has 2 seats, right? Just not a good idea. We're going to overburden them immediately. The call volume is 100 times larger. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So you should be very familiar with your jurisdictional partners with the coordination that you guys have had so far. But if you ever need a list of how many seats people have, call volumes, things like that, we have access to that. We can share that. And then once again, it doesn't just have to be one PSAP. We'll break this down a little bit more, but are there multiple PSAPs that you would like to partner with that would be able to take your calls and potentially process them if they needed to? And then typical call patterns and time of day. Most of the time, your agencies are all going to be busy. You have the same busy hours, but there could be some instance where an agency is very similar in how they operate. Maybe it's has more mileage of freeway, or maybe an agency doesn't have any freeway at all. I think most of the agencies in Maricopa County do. But some things to take under consideration is kind of when they're busy versus when you seem to be busy. Risks. Are you likely to experience the same natural hazard outage condition? We don't really have too many natural disasters in Arizona. An example that is not even realistic, but maybe there was a PSAP on a river that floods and their partnering jurisdiction is near the same river. Maybe you wouldn't want them as your backup because you're both likely to experience the same flooding if something were to happen. So just start to think about the proximity of where the PSAPs are and if they experience the same type of hazards that you would. And then communication infrastructure routes. So one of the things that we've discussed, we're all at different parts in this in the county, but the circuits that connect out to your agency that allows us to get the 911 calls to you. If an agency is very close, there might be a likelihood that they're using the same infrastructure. And if there was an issue with the infrastructure, that could also potentially impact your agency as well. So additional food for thought. Audrey had mentioned the hosts. So the host is an easy way to think about it is it's just a server. When we put you on the same host, it allows for the hot seating capabilities. But there's also kind of putting some of our eggs in the same basket, even though there is redundancy within the network, something that you would want to think about. So easy way to think about it, there might be a host in the East Valley. There could be a host in the West Valley. Do you want to use in your backup all the agencies in the same geographical location? If you're a West Valley PSAP, is there value to adding in an East Valley PSAP, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, and vice versa?
Travis, may I interject a
Yes, ma'am.
question?
Go ahead.
Has it been established on how many nodes are going to be in the region?
I think what we're looking at right now is 7. I'm sorry, in the region. That was the state. Looking at 3 in the region.
3 in the region.
Yeah. And part of the conversation, we talked about hot seating, the ability to hot seat, but that could potentially bring in risk, is interconnectivity of the hosts, which mitigates the entire issue here. And that's what we're working down, but it would require additional hosts. So I'm going to say 3 for now, and then the potential will probably get up to like 5 if we do the interconnectivity, which I think we're going to probably have to do. So does the alternative PSAP personnel have knowledge of that area? So if your operators are having to take phone calls and potentially process them for a jurisdiction they're not familiar with, what is that going to look like in terms of the ability to service the citizen, the customer? Things to take under consideration. And back to the hot seat conversation, are you able to get there in a timely manner? If you're looking at hot seating, maybe not Buckeye and AJ having that option. Traffic, it could take a couple hours to get out there. Think about who's closest to you, travel paths, what makes sense. And if you needed to go to another agency to be able to function and work, what makes the most sense for your operation. Next slide, please. Okay. So there's a couple of rule sets on how a call might need to be sent to another agency. Most of these are kind of your disaster recovery worst day scenario type of a situation. One of these is incredibly important. That's going to have a vast amount of impact. And that is the last one, the ring no answer. So I'm going to spend a little more time with that. But I break down each one of these on the following slides, but you can choose to shut down your PSAP. You can ask for your calls to be sent somewhere else in a specific time of day. SIP-AIR is just a service impairment or outage. Call throttling, kind of a legacy component. Probably don't need to discuss it too much. And then the ring no answer. So next slide, please. So the first one, the abandoned shutdown PSAP. This is if you are not able to function in your facility for whatever reason, and you need to exit and not be able to work out of there. So you have a gas leak. Potentially there's a fire that's getting close to your facility. There's somewhere else that you need to be, and you're not going to be able to answer your 911 calls. We would do a hard shutdown of the entire PSAP and send all of your calls to whomever else is next within your PRF sequence. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to really be said with that, but this would need to be done by calling the ComTech NOC, letting them know that you would like to shut down the entity, and then they would send those calls through the network back to whomever else is next in the PRF. The time of day, this is typically used at your smaller PSAPs. This was done for Florence during a time, and typically your two-seaters. I don't think this is going to be very impactful for Maricopa County, but this is typically due to staffing. If you're unable to staff, let's say your graveyard shift, your overnight shift, just because there's no bodies that you can put there, you can set up a rule so that if your day shift ends at midnight and the next person doesn't come in until 6 a.m., that during that window when you don't have staff, we can automatically set the system up to send those calls to whomever else you would like within your PRF. So once again, I don't think this will be too impactful for all of you, but it's an option if there are windows in time when you're concerned about being able to function and answer 911 calls. The Session Internet Protocol, or SIP-AIR alt routing, this is typically on the network. This is a service impairment, service impact, or an outage. This is not going to typically be something that is your fault or that you're even in the know on. This will be done on the network side. For whatever reason, ComTech will tell, in this case, AT&T, to send the call to any of your agencies. When the call goes down the path, for some reason, it cannot get to you. It could be a fiber cut, it could be a software issue, whatever it is. So they send it back up the pipe to ComTech and say, hey, I can't get to the agency you told me to go to. Let's activate the PRF. So impairment, impact, outage is a SIP-AIR. Next slide. Call throttling, like I said, this is more of a legacy term. I think there's significantly better ways to do this in a next-gen environment, but this was usually done around identifying thresholds with your call types. If you have questions about call throttling, we can definitely talk about it, but I don't foresee any of you needing to do that. And then last and most important is the ring time no answer. So this is the one, while the other ones that I mentioned are probably your disaster scenario, once in a lifetime, not really going to happen, hopefully, knock on wood, if everything's working the way it should be. This one has the potential to potentially happen weekly, monthly, depending upon how you set it up. So the idea of the ring time no answer is you've received a call burst, or you're understaffed, you have too many calls, and you're not answering your 911 calls. They're sitting in your queue, and they're just listening to elevator music while nothing is happening. So what we're able to do is set a timer threshold where if your calls are sitting in your queue for whatever time you select, they will automatically go to your PRF and to your backup agency. So I talked a lot about interoperability and kind of forcing your hand on that. I know our mindset for the past 20 years was I want to keep all my calls. I want control of my calls. I don't want to send my calls somewhere else. But I think we need to kind of transition away to, if there's somebody else who can answer the call and help the citizen, and there's other operational implications we need to take under consideration, but that is a much better workflow than our citizens just listening to elevator music and not getting serviced, especially in an emergency. So typically, the industry standard for this is 28 seconds. We've had a lot of conversations that, due to staffing and in metropolitan regions, this is not exactly realistic. So this is going to be a little bit of an education for us, and working with you to identify what is that perfect point for your agency when that call's sitting in a queue and you want somebody else at another site to be able to engage with it. For example, the Tucson Police Department, which is the second largest PSAP in the state, 64 seats, they opted for 90 seconds. My personal opinion, I think that's a little long. If you can imagine having an emergency, citizens might hang up and then they get recycled back through the system all over again. But that's what they want to do. They have a very specific queue system and that works for them and they're happy with it. So that's great. But we need to work with each one of you to figure out what is that time threshold that you would like to implement, or those calls go somewhere else. So one of the, I know Karen's here and Kim is online, but one of the brilliant things that they set up was Scottsdale utilizes Gilbert as their backup agency right now, their first point. And what they set up was at Gilbert, if that call comes in and it's been PRF'd, she has it have a different sound in the PSAP so that her operators know to not send that call instantly back to Scottsdale, even though when they see the Annie and Allie information, it says it's a Scottsdale call. Because what's going to happen? She's already inundated, she's already down and overloaded. So it just loops continuously back to the Gilbert PSAP until it can find a spot in her calls that she can into. So I think this has been incredibly effective. If you have anything to say on that, I'm pitching it up to you, but.
No, I agree with you that it has been effective. The other thing that we ran into when we were setting up our policy routing was the best way for them to get the information back to us. Because now they're sitting there with our call and they can't really transfer it. And I think this could be something that maybe is the starting of a discussion point at some point. Gilbert has a system called Evertel, and Evertel is sort of a instant messaging system where you can set up groups. So we have rooms that are, in this case, for Gilbert and Scottsdale, but there could be rooms for whatever agencies need to communicate with each other. We make sure that is open at our center at all the time and it's open at their center. If they receive our calls, they can notify us through that. We acknowledge it and then enter it in as a call for service. That way they aren't trying to get caught back in a loop or tying up PSAP by constantly, coming on the air with whatever's happening in Scottsdale.
Thank you. And that was an excellent point there. So everybody's on the same radio network, or there's radio interoperability within the region, whether you're TRWC or RWC. The CAD piece is a little trickier. We discussed potentially looking at a CAD to CAD solution, which would mitigate this. Yes, sir. Okay. So when she says, she's processing it, that information still needs to get back to the anchor PSAP, we'll call it. But what if you could enter it into your CAD in your normal workflow and the system could translate it back to a Scottsdale version of that call with the correct call type? The notes are going to be a little off, but I'm sure you would much rather have that call processed than have a delay in service. So things to think about, but I know that Karen and Kim specifically worked incredibly hard and there was a lot of engagement from both of them. So reiterating the point that the education piece and the collaboration between the two agencies is going to need to be there when you're thinking about who you want to use in this process. Did you have a question on that?
Yes. So a lot of these calls are being answered at
correct.
So one of the things that I've seen is that these callers aren't waiting. What I've noticed is that if they hang up at 17 seconds, that call is still counting up on my board. And if not, and so when it hits 30 seconds, my operator's answering that line and getting the dial tone. If I have my ring no answer set at 30 seconds, my dispatcher or my call taker hasn't answered the call yet. is the system going to transfer a dial tone over to whoever I have set as my PRF?
That's a good question, and we can definitely follow up on that. I don't have an answer, to be honest with you, but it's something to look into. Right, you don't want to 100%, right? And so maybe that that can be fixed with like an automatic abandoned callback kind of feature or something to look into, where if the system is smart enough to realize, hey, the person hung up, I'm hearing dial tone, call them back and get them back in your queue, as opposed to transferring it like you said. Now you have an undue burden on another agency because they think that you were the caller was sitting there. So that's an excellent point. I think we should look into that for sure. Yes, ma'am.
So with when we choose our time, is it easy for us to go in and change it? So like 4th of July, we all get inundated with the fireworks calls. If we're not answering in our 28 seconds, it's going to then overload whoever we send it to. So is that an easy change?
Yeah, so just calling the Comtech knock, they set it up. I think, don't quote me on this, but the time that they said in the presentation was like an hour. I'm sure it can be done quicker than that. But if you 4th of July and New Year's Eve, you're going to get crushed, right? So plan ahead, figure that out. And then hopefully it's a little bit less of a burden on those days. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Karen. How many seconds do you guys have it set at and how often is this happening?
So we changed it. We started off with the 28 seconds and we were rolling more calls than we wanted to and that other agencies wanted to answer for us. So at this time we are at the 90 seconds. To Jim's question, the new Vesta phone system has the auto abandoned callback feature. We've never had one roll a dial tone over to another agency for us. The auto abandon grabs that and starts the process of contacting the caller themselves or itself.
Great. Any additional questions specific to the RNA? So once again, I think this is one that's going to have the most impact that everybody kind of needs to take under consideration. This will probably be utilized a little more frequently, especially the lower your timer is. So
Travis, I have a question. If I'm PSAP that's accepting that is working with another one, is it configurable enough to say, yes, will be if you're abandoned? Yes, will be your primary or secondary if you have an inundation of calls. But can someone else do the PRF? Can another PSAP just be the PRF PSAP? Does it have to be the first option? Has to do all of them, or can the first option is going to do this one, and this one?
So
PRF is somebody that knows your city and you have some sort of connection with that where they could possibly enter the call on your behalf.
I think I understand your question. I apologize if I'm misunderstanding, but are you talking about the ranked versus the round robin distribution?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the ranked versus the round robin distribution and how it's distributing those calls, or just getting confirmation from the other agency that they can accept their calls?
No, I'm specifically talking about if an agency does not want to participate in the ring time, no answer, but they are willing to do other alt routing with abandoned PSAP and inundation of calls.
Understood.
Can a PSAP say, we want this to go?
We'll
to
do
these
this, but not
PSAPs,
that.
But
Yeah.
PRF is specifically to this one that we've worked out how it's going to.
Yeah, I know there's a fast form field, and I'm pretty sure you can probably speak on it better than I can. But it does seem to have quite a bit of knowledge and flexibility in how that's done. I'm going to say yes. I'm definitely going to follow up with Comtech, though, and I think we can get engaged with you on that. But no, we don't want to obviously be sending calls to somebody that hasn't agreed to or has the proper MOUs, IGAs in place beforehand that doesn't want the calls to come to them.
And the follow-up question is, when we go to core services before the transition happens to each of the individual PSAPs, will this, since it's just Comtech and doesn't have nothing to do with AT&T, will this be in place by the end of next month?
So the PRF will be available through MR911 once we do the NGCS migration on February 21st. So
How through Comtech's the one that takes everything over by the end of February.
Right. So when I say through MR911, that you will have access to the PRF. So what I think they've done is duplicated what you have in place right now. And they're going to keep that same workflow since you guys have been doing this for quite some time. And then if you want to make modifications to it, I think that's a conversation we can definitely have.
So if I'm a PSAP that is not scheduled to go in October,
Mhm.
but I want to start this new policy routing, can I have that done even though I haven't transitioned to AT&T managed services?
Yes. So the only process that we're getting back from you is the hairpin, right?
Yeah, well, no, because the hairpins go away the end of February.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Then yes, the answer to your question is yes, and I'm gonna. Okay, so it looks like the answer is yes, yes.
Travis, just one quick question and clarification, and it may be better for the PSAP managers if they can answer. So this all makes sense to me. I understand, the policy writing functions. I understand a PSAP gets busy and we're migrating or moving those calls to another one that can answer it. But just for clarification, so if it's Scottsdale sends to Gilbert, they get their call. Gilbert really can't do anything with that call in the sense of dispatch an officer, manage an officer, really, right? Don't they just have to get it back to Scottsdale and let you know you have a call for you?
That's what we're using the Evertel for, because they can't really send the call back through a system that the call came to them because we didn't answer it anyway. So that's what we're using Evertel for them to let us know, hey, you've got an accident here or whatever. We preempt those sometimes if we know we have a bad crash and there are going to be a lot of calls coming in and the chances of something rolling to them is high. We will throw something in the chat that says we're working an accident at this and this. And then when they get it, then they don't have to type anything into the chat. They can just acknowledge that, yes, they've heard it and they'll tell the callers, we're on the way or whatever.
And just to expand on that a little bit, I'm sure every agency is different, but there are some agencies that have access to the internal radio systems for other agencies. So it would be possible, but once again, the PSAP manager engagement, this is where it's key. Like, who are you set up with? How deep does that go? Do you have access to their radios? Are your CADs interoperable? I think some of you are working on that. I'm not sure where you're at. But I think the eventual end phase of this is that the other PSAP would be able to process the complete call and maybe even potentially dispatch it for that agency if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly would be an admirable goal if we could ever get there. I don't know if we'll see that in our lifetime, but that's certainly a good goal. I just want to make sure, because it really just seemed like you mentioned about we're all on TRWC or RWC, so that doesn't really mean we can communicate with each other. And it really just avoids the death roll of that call being in that death circle. That way, at least Scottsdale would know, hey, this is a high priority call, and you would have it, and then you could engage with that call. I just wanted to make sure it was clear on that. Thank you.
Hey, Travis, I have a question on
Yes,
this.
So it's not a standard. It's a best practice that was put out. So I'm sure there's somebody tested this somewhere and decided that at the 28-second metric is when people typically hang up. I don't know the validity in that, but that's what we were told, is that the 28-second is a best practice, not a standard.
That's maybe from Comtech or something, what they're seeing across the nation?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, but once again, flexible. If you don't like the 28 seconds, whatever makes sense for you based on your call volume and your staffing, really what you can support. Okay, if there's no further questions on the RNA, we can go to the next slide. So there's a couple different ways that you can set up your PRF in terms of how you're sending it to the other agencies within the system. The two that you can do is a ranked versus a balanced approach. So in the ranked solution, any calls beyond the calls that you can take will go to a single backup PSAP. You will have other PSAPs farther down the list. We'll call them ABC. And the call will not go to PSAP B, the second PSAP that you selected, until A has all of their trunks full or is unable to take that phone call. Then it's kind of a waterfall effect. It spills over to the next PSAP. In the balanced or round robin approach, your 3 PSAPs, you can set up a threshold. Let's say it's 5 calls. So 5 calls will go to PSAP A. Then the next 5 calls will go to PSAP B. The next 5 calls to PSAP C. And then it'll cycle back through 1 call, 5 calls, whatever you want it to be. So there's advantages and disadvantages to doing both. You're potentially inundating one PSAP with your calls as opposed to multiple, or you're spreading out the issue into a larger group, but then operationally needing to make sure that those procedures, policies, things of that nature are in place so that they can get those calls back to you. So most people do the ranked approach, but Comtech is able to do either one depending upon what you desire. Yes, ma'am.
Are we, So currently, if I roll over to Tempe, we'll only take 7 of their trunks before we start rolling over to Phoenix. Are we doing that where we're not going to take over all 25 or 30 of their trunk lines?
It would be set up to where you would take over all of their trunk lines. I'm not sure if the system is able to set it up to that certain threshold via the trunks. That's a question that we can take back.
Yeah, I'd like to see that just because I know we've had some experiences where we've gone to other centers. And then if we're going to be a backup for somebody, we just want to maintain operations for Chandler
Right,
first.
100%. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the balanced versus ranked robin approach? Okay, great. So the process that we go through in once we go through the migration path, we're going to have a kickoff meeting. Comtech, a gentleman by the name of Tim Schaefer, another gentleman by the name of Stephen Asherkoff, and then Greg with our team will meet with you, kind of do a little bit of additional education, reiterating a lot of the points that we talked about today, get you some documentation to kind of start that process on thinking about who you would want to be within your PRF. They'll lead the PSAP through a document, fast field document. Some of you have seen that, some of you haven't. It just kind of touches base on you actually putting down the selection on paper. And then we need that 2 months prior to your migration, and it can be changed at any time up to those 2 months. Once we hit that 2 month threshold, we're really getting into a lot of the intricate testing that we want to put the system in place and kind of leave it to soak and then test it to make sure that it's actually working as intended before we cut the PSAP. So we're asking for it up to that time. Once you cut over though, you can change it at will, however you would like. Next slide, please. I don't know why there's 2 number ones. Sorry about that. Did we miss some slides? No? Oh, well, there was more slides, but that's okay. Any comments, questions? There was a QA slide, so I think we can just open the floor.
This is on PRF. Is there, and if you don't have the answer, that's fine, but this is something I think everyone has to really vet out. Are there scenarios where a call could be rolled over to, and this is more of the last one where it's ring no answer, where I'm not part of tier 3, 1, 2, 3, and my PSAP was not selected, that I could receive a call from another PSAP that I'm not identified as their call routing?
That's a great question. So there's 2 PSAPs that could potentially receive a call that is not in the PRF. So the first one is Phoenix PD, and that has to do with the way the system is set up. If we have a misroute and cannot identify where the caller is within Maricopa County. The second one is we have we call it the last resort option, or the LRO, where it is a fail-safe, nobody is answering the call, or there is a massive network outage. We need the call to go to somebody. And as of right now, because they were the biggest PSAP at the time, that it's Tucson PD. So we can change that. But once again, that could have a significant amount of impact to whomever is selected in that process on who's going to be able to take potentially a call from anywhere in the state. So, but it's just the absolute end of the road fail safe. You can have as many agencies in your PRF as you want. Typically, we look for about 3 to 5. But once again, the complication comes back on you that's a lot of agencies that you're going to need to get engagement on how that operational workflow would be if there was an issue. So,
I
Hey,
think,
Travis, we do have your slides. We're going to pull them up.
okay, great. Yeah, I think there was just a couple example slides that to give some people some visuals.
so I think as far as the city of Phoenix, that's a concern that
100%.
we'd have to discuss with what kind of risk is it that we are expected to take on, and this will happen more when we're all on it.
Yeah.
Is there an expectation that city of Phoenix will take on Tucson?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We can have that conversation.
Yeah, because that would be the thing that, I don't know if that would be something that have to be discussed. So the IGAs are going to be really important to make sure that that kind of thing is included, so that city of Phoenix is agreed that they're going to play that role.
Correct. And you brought up an excellent point. I want to just hit on that too. You don't have to just use agencies in Maricopa County, right? You can use anybody in the state. We're all in the same state network now. Now, once again, adding in additional complications, is that agency on the same radio network? same CAD, how do you get that call back to actually be processed? But it's feasible if it's something that you would like to do, it's possible. I just made this up. This is completely made up. Please do not take this as gospel. This is just an example of what a PRF could look like for the East Valley. So I'm going to pick on Tempe just because they're smack in the middle. You can see the paths, who they're using, who's using them. And also kind of tell it gets busy and it gets messy real quick, right? So for their A path, in this example, they select the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. If for whatever reason that didn't work, they selected the Mesa Police Department. If for whatever reason that didn't work, they selected the Phoenix Police Department, right? And then once again, you don't have to stay in the East Valley. If you go to the next slide, please. Potentially East Valley and West Valley agencies could work with each other if that is something that you wish to do. Here's a example of something that could happen in the West Valley. Once again, picking on Glendale PD just because they're in the middle, potentially using the Phoenix PD as their primary backup, looking at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office as their second, and then maybe the Peoria Police Department as their third. So just wanted to give some visuals on what this could look like. Have more paths, have less paths, whatever you would like to do as an agency. Here is a more up-to-date draft migration schedule. Greg's been working very hard to meet with as many of you as possible to kind of really firm up some of these dates. This is still subject to change 100%. All of you are aware of what prior commitments you have, your availability, other projects that you have on your plate, if this is something that's going to be possible. We also have to respect the vendors in terms of ordering the equipment, getting the circuits built out. So right now we have at least somewhat of a commitment that this is something that we can commit to, but open to conversation with all of you if this is something that works for you or not. And then if it is or it isn't, please reach out to Greg and he'll be more than happy to schedule different dates. It's not in your best interest.
Travis, is this different from the one that you showed yesterday?
No, it's the same slide. And we can,
I was going to say, because I thought that
Oh.
Peoria and Surprise were pushed.
oh, that was a typo on my part. I had to have this to the MAG staff earlier in the week.
Okay,
So
so Peoria.
this one is
and-
outdated.
Yes,
Sorry.
Surprise and Peoria are pushed
Correct.
to March.
Yes, yes. Sorry about that. I had to have this to them earlier. So, and then the QA and next steps, just continuing this education and engagement, working with all of you on best practices, what you want to select, and then migrate whenever your date comes up. Any questions about the policy routing function? Any questions about what this is going to look like, next gen in general, anything that we can help with for today?
One quick comment, Travis, for the group. So being part of the study committee for most of that time and the other meetings, I will say on this policy writing function, it's going to be critically important, as Liz mentioned, that each agency talk with your other agency, have IGAs in place. Certainly Phoenix PD, Phoenix Fire, Jesse's on here as well for Phoenix PD. Their ability to be a backup and use Evertel may be very limited, due to their activity levels. So this was a big topic in those study committees, that the need for IGAs and understanding, so people aren't surprised and it's clearly outlined. So it seems like a great process, seems like there's great benefits, but on the management side, it's gonna be important that everybody understands what you're getting into and what you can and can't do.
Travis, is it the expectation, just to make sure that I'm clear on this, that each PSAP will go into a grant agreement individually with the state of Arizona?
I don't think there's any expectation. I think we're very open to the group doing collective IGA or individual IGAs, whatever works best for you and with each other. And we will help however we can to make that process easier.
So the follow-up question to that is then, is there a possibility of that there's a funding priority established? My concern is that we'll get into this reimbursement model and that there will not be enough monies for whatever reason to cover. Does the state going to provide us with guidelines of what will be priorities to cover the monies we have and what they will not reimburse?
Regarding the PRF or just in general?
I'm sorry?
Regarding the PRF or just in general?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were just talking. Oh, are we still on PRF? I thought.
No. We can just say in general, yes. So one of the other takeaways from the study committee meeting was the grant was a big topic of discussion. is it the best way to move forward? Some of you have ran into challenges with purchase orders and getting contract signs and all types of those things. So internally, we're having those conversations on, do we want to continue the grant in the grant guidance, giving prioritization on, network over some other component. And if not, if we don't want to keep the grant guidance, what does that end up looking like? I don't know.
So nothing's established yet on the prioritizing funding if, for whatever reason, there's more sweeps or we don't get an increase.
Yeah.
The state, I feel like they need to have a plan to say, okay, well, down to brass tacks, this is what we're going to cover, and everything else is going to have to be self-funded.
Yeah, understood. We can take that into consideration.
And then the follow-up is for the grant agreement that the PSAPs will sign. Is there negotiating on that on a couple of things? There's some concerns that if they have, will they be able to?
On the grant agreement specifically?
Yeah, with the state.
Yes, any PSAP can discuss any topics that are on the grant agreement with us. I'm not the lawyer. We send them to our legal team. I'm not making any promises that they will or will not be approved. But if you have qualms with any of those components, we can take it up for discussion.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Sir.
So along this kind of the same lines as Liz was just talking about, contractual agreements. Currently the cities, or in my case, the county, we have a contractual agreement with the city of Phoenix to provide this, the maintenance and the services for the network. And now we're going to have to enter into an agreement with Comtech or with AT&T. So is there any draft language out there that can be provided to agencies, or is that something that MAG can assist with, or is that something that we as a region want to work on together as a region, that we kind of, so that we're all drafting the same type of language? Are we going to do that independently as agencies?
So right now, the state has the master service agreement with AT&T. So you're a co-op on that product. So you more than likely will use that contract, as has everybody else in the state, to enter into a contract with AT&T directly. If we keep that model, if that's what you would like to do, and then your relationship with AT&T, and then we do the reimbursement process through the purchase order. And so I think once we get engagement with MCSO, with the AT&T staff, we can have them come out and explain that process. But I can get you a copy of the contract by the end of the day.
Okay.
So, and you can review that and then send it to your legal team, and they can chew it up and redline it, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Travis, just following up on actually Jim's point, and appreciate it, was really one of the things I want to talk about. So the ways, I'll say Phoenix, I can't speak for all their cities and jurisdictions, but the way we do it is, obviously you have a state contract, right? And we co-op or link to that. We create our own contract. Obviously, you're having a state contract allows us to meet our competitive procurement requirements, but we'll create our own contract with them. We'll bring in some of our own terms and conditions is how we do it. And so then we are entering in, and it sounds like this is your plan and your direction, is we are entering into a contractual agreement with AT&T by doing so. And at that point, we have a relationship with AT&T. We are now a customer of AT&T. So I just want to make sure that that is a relationship, and that's how I understand it. I also want to make sure that as we're going down this path, and my direction to Liz and our staff and working with Jesse for Phoenix PD is that we are going to do everything we can to make this successful, right? We have to have success. I think we all agree on that. And we've had AT&T and I think twice to our centers to assess. We want to make sure we're about 10 months out on our migration. And so we want to make sure we're successful. So I just would like to, if you can support, we are getting some pushback from AT&T to share information with us because they say they have to share it with the state only. But if we're going to enter a contract with AT&T, we're going to be a customer of AT&T. We'll have a contractual relationship with AT&T. We are the customer. Now, I'm not saying you should know everything, and certainly want you to know everything. I just ask that you can let AT&T, they need to share information with us. And my point specifically is, for our PSAPs, if they come in and they make the assessment and we need 250 positions between City of Phoenix, and cost is $10 million, right? I'm just throwing out numbers.
Right.
And you say, well, yeah, that sounds good, but we're only going to give you 100 positions, but we need all our positions migrated, right? Then the City of Phoenix is going to be responsible for that cost. And we have to start planning for that, right? And figure out how we're going to fund that. So we really need to make sure AT&T is open with their assessment, open what that looks like, open what you're going to approve, I guess, ultimately for our PSAPs and our city of Phoenix. So that would be my ask is you can, have A&T share that information. I know you're working and planning. We're having a meeting with our team we've established because obviously as the larger PSAPs in this region, we're heavily concerned this goes well. And I know you are committed to it going well as well. And so we are as well. So anyway, I would ask that because we are going to become a customer of AT&T through that. That's how we will do it, right? That's how we do it for everybody. To Jim, to your point, we will have a contract, but we don't just take your contract with the state and rubber stamp it. That is not how we do it. And I doubt any agency works that way as all, because they all have their own specific terms and legal things, right? So that's how it works for us. So
No, I completely understand. And thank you for that feedback. To reply to that, yes, AT&T you're going to be their customer, right? I also have a contract with AT&T. I'm also AT&T's customer, right? What we have tried to do, and it's been quite successful, is really insert ourselves from a subject matter expertise perspective, right? While you're looking at this contract, I'll give you as an example. You haven't looked at the contract, right? All I do is look at this contract for the past 3 years. So I will consider myself a subject matter expert in the contract. I want to be there with you to help you walk through it. AT&T is my vendor. I'm not on their side at all. I'm on your side. I'm here to work for you, right? So we collectively, as much as you would like me to be, will partner with you to help you get through that contract and make sure that it meets the needs of the fire department, the police department, the sheriff's office, any of your agencies, right? I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm not asserting an authority that I don't have. Strictly here as a subject matter expert to help in any way that we can.
And then I'll follow up. One of the things that we submitted or we gathered as a region was a budget that included additional positions, additional call taking workstations, 911 call taking workstations. And so a lot of PSAPs have been wanting to know how will they know those are approved? How will they be able to say, yes, you get this many when we do your transition upgrade?
Yeah, so I think each individual agency has started those conversations. I'll use Scottsdale as an example. I think she needed 3 additional seats. So when she went through that process, that was a conversation directly with the vendor and with her and with the state. And we'll have those conversations with any one of you individually or as a region, depending upon how you want to do the procurement once that gets decided. Because of the idiosyncrasies of how this went about, everybody's in vastly different stages of, site walks and meetings and having quotes or not having quotes. And so I don't know what the end all be all answer is, but I think it's so drastically different for each PSAP. I think it would be challenging to get all of them on the same page, but not impossible. So
what I'm asking specifically, Travis, is the state funded positions. So yeah, they can work out self-funded positions that they're going to keep, but there have been requests for additional state funded 911 call taking workstations.
Correct.
That's what I'm speaking of.
yes,
And how will we know that the state approved those?
through the individual grants that the agencies have. So it's a direct relationship with the state in their contract for the grant, and then with their vendor, their direct relationship with AT&T. So when we have a meeting with you, right, we'll have a quote. We'll figure out the state will approve X number of seats, right? We'll get a grant agreement now directly with the city of Phoenix for the Phoenix Police Department and the Phoenix Fire Department. And then that'll be a direct relationship that we have, the state and the city, as we do with the other 20 some odd city and state grant agreements and contracts that we'll have in place at the time.
Okay. And then can you touch upon the formula for adding state funded positions? Is
Yes.
that changed?
So we did have a lot of conversation. This was brought up at the meeting that we had, the PSAP manager meeting. I think there's been a lot of contention on the call seat ratio, and it maybe not aligning with administrative calls and other responsibilities that the PSAP has. So something that we brought to Rapid Deploy, who's a data analytics provider, is for them to identify a way to calculate like usage of the console. And that's being implemented right now. And once we have that, more than likely transition to something that shows that the console is actually being used, right? If you have a console that nobody touched for a year, or 5 consoles, let's say, and you ask for 5 additional ones, it's not really justified, right? So we want to try to tighten this up a little bit, because we did hear a lot of your feedback that it wasn't as it was expected to be. On bias, I think it was better than what it was before, where it was just the state kind of did whatever they want. But we're trying to clean it up to where it really meets the needs of all that you do in your dispatch center, not just the 911 calls.
So are you going to hold off on granting any new positions until that is done through mission critical?
We've been granting extra positions. A lot of them were in line with the call seat ratio, which with each contract that we have, the grant agreement, there's an opportunity to justify anything beyond what that said. And so some agencies have done a phenomenal job of kind of giving that additional justification or purchasing them themselves. So there's a lot of agencies, so it's different across the board, but.
So until you change the formula, you're still going to go with the call ratio that you've been doing the last couple of years?
We're still going with the call seat ratio, but there's always an opportunity if you can justify the additional seats for them to be approved. So we're going to work together. So if you want 100 extra seats, sell it, right? Like let's have a conversation. Why do you need 100 extra seats? Let's just have the conversation. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, but it's a process.
So the state will do it by a PSAP by PSAP. That will be the formula on what their needs are and what they present.
I wouldn't say it that way, but.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this topic has come up, as Mr. Jensen mentioned, in conversation with Glendale, Mesa, Phoenix city managers and ADOA, and really encouraging, I'll put it that way, ADOA to work with us in terms of better understanding funding processes, so greater clarity, transparency, understandability going forward. So that was top of mind among the city managers in these conversations. And the city managers have also indicated to DR Sloan, the state CIO, that they would like to have regular check-ins and updates about this process in its entirety, including funding issues. So we'll look forward to those conversations with city managers and ADOA. So as we mentioned kind of at the top, there's a lot to work on here, but just noting that this topic did come up as something that we will continue to work on.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions?
Chair Del Webb online has a question.
Hey, Travis, a question I have about the study on console usage. Is that going to, if agencies have funded consoles and you look at it and say, hey, I don't think you're getting enough use out of these, would you take away funding, or is that already set?
No, I don't think there's ever been any discussion on taking the funding away. So it's just be an algorithm that would justify the need to increase the seat count.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Going,
All
gone.
right. Thank you for letting me speak today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Travis. Guess we'll move on to item number 5. Are there any requests from members of the MAG 911 oversight team for future agenda items? Hearing none.
All right. Are there any requests from the members of the MAG PSAP managers group for future agenda items?
Michelle Potts has something.
I think one of the topics that we had on one of the previous 911 oversight committee meetings was the data sharing agreement, having some conversation about that. And I think there was some agreement on that committee. So I don't know if we've had some of those conversations with MAG or if that's something that we need to take on.
I think we need to take another look at that and bring it back to the committee.
All right. Are there any additional comments from members of the MAG oversight team? Done.
Okay. Are there any additional comments from the members of the MAG PSAP managers group?
If not,